Transportation Advisory Committee meeting, and we will begin our meeting. Welcome, everyone. Let's have our roll call.
Mr. Anderson?
Here.
Mr. Van Metzger? Mr. Johnson?
Here.
Mr. LaSalle?
Here.
Mr. Mahoney?
Here.
Mr. Meyer?
Here.
Ms. Shafsma? Here.
Okay, well, thank you, and let's go to item 2, approval of the minutes. Minutes of May 21, 2013, and you've all had a chance to read those, and are there any corrections that need to be made? All right, do we have a movement?
I move the minutes be approved.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention? Okay, they're approved. All right, let's skip to item number 4, agenda analysis. Are there any items on the agenda that need to be added or subtracted?
I just want to make mention of June 23rd triathlon, so we'll talk about that at the end of the items. And then there's an item that I want to talk a little bit further about on construction projects. It's a restriping plan for Claremont that I want to add. And I didn't let Kathy know until today, so they're not in your agenda packet.
Might almost I might almost recommend, since we have some Tharp Court residents here, that we might push 6B to the beginning, because our presenter for 6A is on her way anyway and not present. So.
All right. And we may also want to touch on the, in August, the Antique Fair has moved, the Chamber Antique Fair has moved to the Interpretive Center, so talk about that a little bit and how that impacts traffic. So, okay, well, with that, we will then move to, we'll move 6B if everyone's in agreement with that. We'll move 6B to the top of the schedule, and we'll have the Glen Oak Road at Tharp Court presentation.
Yeah, that was just information.
Yeah.
We were just we provided the information on what really Martin's crew did, and I think that's why the property owners are here, I'm guessing. So so our staff report is just information in your packet.
Okay. And did the residents receive copies of that report?
I don't believe so.
Yeah, our report's basically outlining, everything that we committed to at the previous TAC meeting was implemented just shortly after we adjourned. So 90% of everything was completed next day or by the end of the week.
Okay.
So I know we have some residents from the neighborhood that are here for the public comment section, so we may want to hear their comments if they have some concerns, and it's something we may be able to address.
Okay, so just in summary, it looks like completed, implemented. The dead-end signs were installed. No parking signs were installed. And there was a little bit of trouble relocating the stop sign due to utility conflicts.
Yeah, it's what we indicated when the request was made, to see if we could move it a little further closer to the actual intersection of Glen Oak. And we investigated, and it is with the utility conflict. It's not going to be able to be moved any further from where its current location is.
Okay. And so there was 50 feet on the... I can't
50
remember
feet
which,
on two of the caddy corners, and then 25 feet on the other caddy corners.
Okay.
Try and increase the sightline distances for both the north and south and the east and west.
Okay. All right. And then there was an accident there that was in the police report, said that there was no mention or no report submitted on that, and that evidently may have been because it was a smaller accident that was not reported.
Yeah.
Yeah, I checked with the police department, and they said that, I attached the email. They said no police report had been filed, and I just assumed that it's because a police report isn't filed for every incident. It depends on whether there's injuries or whether or not the amount of damage. So So the police department, although they said that one had occurred, the police department didn't have anything that we could look at and determine if the intersection layout was a factor at all, because they had no report.
Okay. So the primary issue was that residents coming out of Tharp Court, that's hard to say 5 times fast, couldn't see around the cars. They had to nose out so far that...
Actually, they said that accident was on Coast Redwood, across the street, and that it was a vehicle easing out, and that got hit by somebody on Glen Oak.
Okay. Okay, good. So any other addition in terms of just summarizing the okay. Well, we'd love to have you come up and share with us, Sharon. Sharon Lance. Thanks for coming.
First of all, thank you for doing all this for us. The 50 feet, as we're coming out of Tharp Court, that would be on the west side. That 50 feet is working out much better. We can at least see. However, I remember we discussed whether it should be 50 feet on all 4 corners. Now, when I was just coming here tonight, on the right-hand side, because that's 25 feet now, the 2 vehicles that were there was a car and then a Ford Explorer. And now a vehicle like that, like an SUV type, whatever, those are what really makes it hard to see. And so still, because I was going to go westbound, you still are nosing quite a ways out there. So I know one on the panel, I can't remember if it was Bob or who it was down on this end, said too that it should be 50 feet on all corners. So I was just wondering if maybe we could reassess that. Also, the dead end sign, you know, sometimes they say bigger isn't always better. Well, on Friday the 7th, I was out working in my front yard, and I saw a couple cars come turn around, you know, and I went, and so I'm standing down there going, yeah, dummies, can't you see the dead end sign? Right. So after about the 4th car, I went in, got a piece of paper, and I wrote down, and between hours of 1 o'clock and 4:10 on Friday, we had 11 vehicles come down there and turn around, 3 of which were delivery vehicles.
Looking for an outlet.
Yeah. Now, I know...
Did they make deliveries to the residents on Tharp Court?
No, I wouldn't have said it.
Okay.
They just
clarifying.
came and turned around.
Just clarifying.
No, I was watching.
They flunked their spelling test.
Yeah, that's right.
And also, remember when we first talked about the dead end sign? I still think, when we're looking, any of us, when we're looking for an address or anything, what do we look for? We look for the street sign, right? As you're coming, if you were going east and you are going up Glen Oak, because there's the trees there where the no parking 50-foot sign is, because of the trees, there's a big electrical pole, I guess. That sign is around the corner, and then you see it. So I think when people are coming, since the road sign is on the other side of where the dead end sign is, to catch, of course, incoming traffic, I don't think people are seeing this. I think they're so, you know, because of the trees and everything, I honestly don't think they're seeing it. And
So by the time they turn the corner,
committed.
they've already committed, and then they see the dead end.
if they even see it, because the funny thing was, there were several of the people that are in our neighborhood that have been coming to the meetings that I said, well, did you see the new sign? They go, what sign? Okay. I don't know. So anyway, we were just wondering, could we just have that little yellow sign up on top of the street sign and see if, I mean, I'm sorry, but,
Okay.
I mean, 11 in 3 hours
I think
and
that's
10
what we
minutes.
recommended originally.
With me.
And then the rest
Yeah.
of the group said, no, we don't
Right.
want that kind of a sign. 'Cause
Right.
It doesn't work.
Right.
But it does.
I think it does, because I know when I'm going somewhere and I'm looking to turn, I'm always looking at the road signs, and I think if the yellow one was on top, I think people
That
would
makes
see
sense
that a
to
lot
me.
better.
So can we remove the other one then? It sounds like it's not effective.
Hey, I don't, that's up to you guys. It's in. I mean, it's not going to hurt anything where it's at, but I really think people would see the one up above better.
Yeah.
And on that accident that happened, I don't think there was a police report because Tim NATO that was here before, he said that it was hitting that left quarter panel, and that when she drove around to park, the car was making a funny noise. So I don't know whether, they maybe decided to pay out of pocket instead of going to insurance or whatever too. But but other than that, we did have the speed radar thing up there, and it's, people always look at, I do the same thing. If I see one of those, oh man, and I slow down, even if I'm going slower than it already tells me. So I don't know if that's, was such a big help, because you could hear, especially motorcycles, when they get on the other side of that sign, then it's like, aha, and then they take off and they go a little faster. So,
That's what
But-
a speed hump does too. People go faster on the other side of the hump.
Exactly, yeah. I know that Emily's husband, Sean, was mentioning me tonight. I was talking to them, and he, would like to have speed bumps. Well, I said, no, I don't think so, because I know that would be another cost. Plus, kids would just bomb over that anyway.
yeah.
I mean, we all have shocks on our vehicles.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's a, that's a roadway that goes to the high school.
It's a main, yeah.
So,
Yeah. But other than that, thank
Okay,
you again
well,
for
good.
taking time to listen to our problems.
yeah,
Okay.
and hopefully things will continue, and,
Yeah.
and these delivery people will get the message.
Especially with big trucks, they're
Exactly.
trying to turn around.
Yeah.
Not working.
Yeah, it's uncomfortable.
Thank you.
Okay.
So we're gonna change out that dead end sign with the topper. We think that would make sense. The no parking piece, I haven't, to be honest with you, I haven't really been out there to look at the new improvements, which sounds like I should go out there and take a look at that. But the intent was to get, those cars that are closest to you as you pull up into the intersection, those cars that would first likely to be a conflict on Glen Oak Road, that you would see those, and as you saw the clearing there, you would have that opportunity to edge back out and look the other way. So it still may feel uncomfortable, but I think we are going to find ourselves. I just worry about on-street parking and elimination of on-street parking.
Right.
I hear that there's a need for that. So I'd still like to hold to the 25 feet.
It opened that intersection up. I've been there twice. And now you can see it's a big intersection there with less. But we got other streets on 7th that you can't see when you pull out too.
Right. If we had to meet this kind of a standard for all of our intersections that came before you, people would
be
complain we'd
prohibitive.
have a problem. This one, we're fortunate to have a little bit of undeveloped parcels on either side of this property, with the pond on one side or the stream corridor on kind of one end, and then really just county development kinds of development, up the hill from this street. But I haven't been out there to really kind of see it for myself. I'd have to get out there, but I don't know.
I
if
wasn't here last week, so I
you
wasn't
got
having an
if you got a
opportunity.
strong thought there, but
Well, in trying to keep balance, between on-street parking and visibility, with the current situation of 50, 25, would that be acceptable for now? And maybe we can revisit that at some point down the line.
how about this? How about we'll look at it? Martin and I both haven't been out there, it sounds like, so we'll get out there and take a quick look and bring back to you next month if we think a change is needed.
That sound
And
Yeah, I'd like to just say that,
or September. We're not meeting. We haven't made that determination yet. We're not meeting the next 2 months, right?
right.
Okay.
well, I'd just like to say that this kind of thing makes me feel good about being on this committee because it shows the city and the committee and the citizens working together to solve problems and make life a little bit easier for the people on that particular street. So, works good.
Get the guy to cut his grapes up at the top, coming out on Beaver Creek Road from Glen Echo. It's starting to creep out. If you're up with a certain size vehicle, you can't see to your left. His grapes need to be,
Cut back.
Trim back.
Oh, this
Trim
is
back.
at Beaver Creek and Glen Oak
yeah, on the left.
on the left as you're coming out of there.
Right? You don't. Well, I went through there today, so I came up there. You know, that's a real bad intersection there.
That's why we go the other way.
Yeah.
We've
Yeah.
got to remember.
We can
We can
ask
take a
code
look when we
enforcement.
go out there and refer to code enforcement.
That's in the city side, so
We've got to remember that car's going to win every time. This pedestrian doesn't have a chance.
Yeah. Unfortunate. Okay, well, let's, if there's no other comment on that, let's move to the next item. Thank you for coming again, appreciate that. And item 5 is public comment, and I don't, other than we don't have anyone signed for that. So new business discussion items, 6A is the parking infographics presentation.
All right. Christina was good enough to be available to share her knowledge of parking, and I think this is really parking related to development and parking standards, kind of general. She'd sent just some information, and
You know what?
rather than try to figure it all out on my own and become a parking specialist or have Mark do that, we just asked Christina to come and go over some of this information for us.
No. It would be, but it would be a PDF.
I'm not sure
Is that what you're going to show?
when we're talking redevelopment, this on-street parking issue that we just dealt with is probably a good example of the
I
kind
would
of
have the
things that
PDF
the
in the
TEC gets
registrar
involved
directory.
with. I think it's more general information. I think a lot of the ideas that you're going to hear with regard to parking requirements for a particular kind of development are more likely to be heard through the Planning Commission. So,
I was going to ask you about that, John. The implication of what this sums up to be has sort of points to growth and development of the community in general. The downtown area is what we're really zeroing in on. And it seems to me that the big question is, what do we really want the downtown area to be? And that seems to be a pretty big question. Are we coming at this backwards? Looking at the off-street parking before we look at the overall picture. What do we really intend to I understand the marketplace is driving all this. It can't be developed unless you address the off-street parking. And so, which comes first, the chicken or the?
yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I go outside of Oregon City from time to time, and you get into other communities that are, they're maybe old, maybe not as old as Oregon City, but they're long-time communities that are kind of reinvigorated with, new development, kind of new charm to these older neighborhoods, and many of them don't the nice thing about the differences that I see is on one side of our main street is pretty much the river. It's a hard border. You can't encroach out there to find parking. And on the other side, you got a bluff that, while it's not as hard a border as the river is, there's elevation change there. So most of us are lazy enough to not want to go out into those areas to find parking, to walk to a business that we might need. but a lot of our neighborhoods, 23rd or Sellwood, or they've got the advantage because there is that parking that goes kind of out into the neighborhood. So if I go to one of those restaurants and I find I don't have parking, well, it's just a matter of how many blocks I really have to go before I get there. And Oregon City doesn't quite have that. So you're right. It's kind of interesting how we've got some capacity for growth. How much do we really have is kind of got
I think
some-
that's a big question for this community. It really is. It's got something to do with the comp plan too, and it's related to what's going to happen down at
Blue Heron.
Blue Heron. Because you talk about parking, if that thing develops the way people think it's going to be, it's going to draw a lot of people, not just from the Portland area, but from the state and the interstate. That's going to be a point of destination.
Right.
And people keep talking about that cliff, that bluff. And the big elephant in the room is that railroad. And it just goes through town without too much conversation.
Well, unless there are other comments, let's thank you, Christina.
Thank you, Chair Meyer and other members of the TAC. I'm Christina Robertson Gardner, and I'm a planner with the city. And what I was kind of my task direction tonight, and kind of what my goal for tonight is to give you just a little more academic background relating to the field of parking and urban design and economic redevelopment. I am not a transportation planner. I'm not an economic development specialist, but I'm a generalist. So I'm here to kind of give you a generalist background. And if you have any specific questions I can't answer, I will go back and try to look for it. And so really all tonight is to give you a little bit of the breadth of the discussions that are going out in relations to how parking standards and economic development and revitalization intersect. And that's really what my goal for the takeaway tonight is, for you to know that there is a nationwide ongoing discussion about these issues, and every community has tried to figure out where they fit in that. So, Portland has a different answer for what Oregon City does based on their market and their topography. Mm-hmm. And Oregon City's going to have to figure out what their answer is. And I guess my takeaway is, as a staff planner, I don't believe we have to be a slave to the ITE manual on minimum parking standards. And that's kind of what why I put a little bit of provocative first slide to this presentation is if we are a slave to what we have done over the last 50 years, and I'll talk a little bit about how we currently look at minimum parking standards, we can lose out on our opportunity to revitalize our downtown, because we are basically entrenching a land use model that is really land, and it's land heavy. It sucks up a lot of land, and we don't have a lot of land to suck up in downtown Oregon City. So I'm going to go through these slides. They were part of your presentation, and I'll speak a little bit to them, and I'm always willing to answer questions if you have during the presentation.
Just as long as we all know, ITE is...
is the International... That's a good question.
Transportation, ITE, International Transportation.
Equivalents or...
Institute of Transportation Engineers?
Yeah,
There you go.
Yeah,
There you go.
their manual. There you go. Institute of Transportation Engineers. And they've created over the years, based on really a suburban model of making sure that there is enough off-street parking to accommodate the highest peak use of a particular land use. So in actuality, if you take the IT manual to its actually end run, it's like building a shopping mall for December 24th. It's kind of how I talk about it. So we don't want to build our cities around December 24th like a shopping center. So how do we best manage the parking we want to support the businesses we want, but in a flexible, creative way that allows enough ability for the community to feel that there is enough parking, but we haven't create a situation where each use only holds their parking lot and doesn't share with anybody else and overbuilds, to assume that every time, especially in downtown, you are going to get in your car and drive to the next spot, and then you're going to get in your car again and drive to the next stop and trip chain, and everybody only has their own parking lot. Because if we did that, we're almost done redeveloping.
Well, and there's also, it seems to me to be a philosophical thing happening to where there's a thought that if we create scarcity, if you will, of spots, then maybe that'll motivate people to say, hey, I can ride my bike. And
So, absolutely. Free
transit.
parking does not help increase multimodal transportation. So just real quickly, kind of the Bible to looking at parking demand management is a gentleman named Donald Shroop. And if you look at the definitive copy of the high cost of free parking, it is about 600 to 800 pages, but he has now released a smaller version. But he has basically spent the last 20 years being an evangelist about what happens when communities require parking. Is we're set in a situation where you are requiring so much minimum parking, regardless if the developer wants it, the community wants it, the business wants it, and therefore you're subsidizing each parking space as part of your redevelopment model. So every time a developer is looking at the parking, he also is looking at the cost of the land. The cost of land is lower. So I think what Blaine is saying is, when we subsidize free parking, we are, in a sense, choosing one economic development model by doing that. We're not allowing flexibility. And so just real briefly, it's you might hear people talk about being a Shroopist or somebody who really supports it. And this is one of those books that someone will read it and then they'll get on the evangelical wagon about supporting that. And as a staff member, I think I support his premise, which is mandating high minimum off-street parking levels does do a detriment because we are creating one type of land use. Now, of course, there's a huge gray area in the middle, and every community is going to find their sweet spot. And so today I'm not here to tell you what I think your sweet spot is. It's more trying to give you the broad range of the academics that's out there. This was a really fun podcast. There's a link that Kathy sent you in your packet. I really recommend, if you have about 15 minutes, just to sit down and listen to it. You can just click on it right on your computer and listen to it, or any of your other devices. And Freakonomics is a web program. It's also sometimes on NPR's Planet Money. But what they do is they kind of look at the intersection of economics and kind of, they call it Freakonomics, because sometimes we don't realize how economics plays in our day-to-day life.
Right.
And they had, in this podcast, they talked about Donald Shroop, they interviewed him, and they're also talking about some of the work San Francisco's doing, which is, the planning community is actually very interested in it. They're looking at the ultimate free market approach to parking fees for parking meters. They're trying to use parking, the cost of your hourly parking fee is based on its proximity to things. So parking spaces that have a high use because they're near a lot of uses, you're going to pay more per hour for them. And as you move farther away in parts of San Francisco, you'll pay less. So it's trying to give an economic advantage for people to park farther away and not cluster in right where all the use is. But the thing, of course, is San Francisco. So the idea is that they're trying to get real-time data, and it'll always be shifting based on the information they get. So it's this big interesting is they're using real-time data and market economics to price parking based on its actual use and its demand, which is everyone's very fascinated because if anybody's going to do it, San Francisco can pull it off.
Well, speaking of that, do the new parking meters downtown Oregon City have a database for each one that talks about its use and high use, so you could analyze that very thing that you just mentioned?
I don't know, and I might have to pass that off a little bit to John, but I think what they were doing was the fact that in real time, within a week or a month, or they're trying to, I think they were starting a month, but their goal was to get even closer, was to hit that data updated. And so it's a really dynamic thing. So they're always up to what the actual use and demand is, which is actually really fascinating. They're taking it to the end run, which is, if you talk to a lot of economists, they would be pricing everything. We price when you go over the I-5 bridge, and it would be this much money at 5 a.m., this much money at 6 a.m. And
Yeah.
I mean, they would price everything. So there's a real value
Well, it's-
and a real price to your impact and to how you use our roads. And so that's kind of that value pricing.
It
And we,
really comes down to the issue of supply and demand.
right. And so we're not, and that's kind of the high cost is we're subsidizing that supply and demand right now. We're not monetizing it to its true cost.
Well, and the issue I think too is like with Oregon City, our downtown, unlike say something more developed or mature like the Pearl District or 23rd, there are enough really fascinating kinds of things that draw a large number of people, and so there's the solid demand. I think one of the things that I think business owners downtown now taking in a sense a risk to be down here, they're saying make it convenient for people to come down.
Yeah. And I'll get to that because that's an urban design question, and I
But
think
at some
I'll get
point-
to a little bit of the Willamette Falls without diving too much into the project. But real briefly, it's a fun 15 minutes. You get to hear Shroop talk. It's fascinating, and I like it because it kind of talks about what we all do is trying to find parking spaces. I mean, we all do it. We all drive around the city trying to find parking spaces. And a little bit about parking management. And I want to, this next slide talks a little bit about the difference between when someone comes in for a land use application. I'm a developer. I want to build a 10,000 square foot office building based on our parking standards. I have 10,000 square feet. Office spaces require 2.7 spaces per thousand. Ergo, I need to have this big of a parking lot off street. That's for an actual development. It's a point in space and point in time where an application's coming in and we have code and we require it. But more importantly is what we're doing downtown now, and that's a parking management program. That's saying, how do we best use the on and potentially off-street parking that we have and better manage it and it's easier to manage, obviously, the on-street parking we have, but also how do we work with property owners to leverage their unused parking spaces, nights, weekends, sharing. How do we get those communications so they know kind of the rising tide lifts all boats? And instead of saying, this is my parking space, no one use it, stay out, that's not how we're going to revitalize downtown. So the parking management is that, as a city, is here's these space and times where land use, and that's kind of where the planning division comes in. We look at our code, we review the land use applications, very clear and objective. They build it, but that parking issues don't end or start the day that building gets built. So it's parking management. How do we do a long-term discussion both on and off-street parking? So there's lots of academic discussions, and Rick Williams, who was involved in the 2009 parking study, he's actually a fantastic resource. He's his own consultant. He actually works now with the Lloyd Transportation Group. It's a lot of the property owners in the Lloyd District are looking at redeveloping to be a bigger entity, and they are looking at creating more multimodal place, and they basically hired Rick to help promote parking management in the Lloyd District area. So, but he also does consulting as well, and we worked with him a little bit in some of our parking code changes in this upcoming TSP. But he's a great resource in the region. But parking management, there's lots of best practices out there that we can see what works best for us in Oregon City. So as the next one, so what Rick Williams looked at in 2009 was kind of our existing parking, what we had, how we were using it, and said that we weren't using it very efficiently. And he had a bunch of recommendations. We've implemented some. We have some we still need to implement. It's a long-term project. And we're not there yet. We'll always have parking management. We'll always. It's just a constant process to tweak. Always tweaking, always moving. Does this make sense? This new development came over, and when the North End develops to kind of in the 11th through 17th Street along Center and Main, we'll probably have to tweak parking management to address it because right
We just
now
need to stop growing.
well, there's a whole other issue with that, but So anyway, he has some really good recommendations that still need to be implemented. But it's a great document. It's on our website. But one thing he did say was part of what we did in this TSP update is he really said we need to have a different minimum parking standard for downtown because we were finding in new development that wanted to come downtown, when they actually penciled out how many spaces they needed to actually meet our minimum requirements based on the IT manual, they couldn't physically do it without building structured parking. And as you know, in our economy right now, it doesn't pencil out to build a structured parking development next to every office space that wants to be built, nor do we necessarily want to suck up every last piece of our available parking so regardless if we could pay it or not, that's not the best use of our land, to have a lot of parking garages and not as much development. So one of his recommendations was to bring it closer to the actual demand for parking, which is this a little wonky, but it was I think it was like 0.75 spaces per thousand. And to give you an estimation, our lowest ITE demand is at office, and that's 2.7 spaces. So that kind of tells you the disconnect of where we are. So what we recommended, this talks a little bit about how parking management's lots of different options. You know, you can work on multimodal, you can look at parking meter cost, you can work on, you know, when you are signing, you know, 2 hour to 4 hour to 6 hour parking, where's the right placing for it. So that's just a recommendation that there's lots of tools in the toolbox. And for us in Oregon City, some tools may work better than others, but there's a big array of tools. Here are some examples of development that were proposed in different parts of the city, that they were trying to be creative in some infill spots, and actually did find that there was a relative amount of adjacent on-street parking, not abutting on-street parking, but adjacent on-street parking within that block that could satisfy the parking needs, but it was so far off from our parking standards. They were really reticent of going in front of the Planning Commission for a parking variance, knowing that they'd have to get all the financing and develop the project with the hope that they get a parking variance, which is not a good place to be in when you're a developer. This is another example in downtown, and just to give you, this is some tuck under parking right here. So this was the footprint of the building, right down here. So this would be an open parking spot, and then you'd pop in for some tuck under, just to give you some context of this building. And this amount of spaces was half of what the ITE manual would have required for that size of parking lot. So just to kind of tell you the disconnect of, which I think that's a lot of spaces for downtown Oregon City, honestly. But that kind of tells you the disconnect of where we are. This shows you a little bit of what our existing ratio is for off-street parking in Oregon City based on use. And one of the recommendations that Rick Williams had again was to lower the parking requirements for downtown. And what we proposed to the Planning Commission, the City Commission, was just do a straight 50% reduction. So just across the board, whatever thing you see on the left in black, you'll see here on the right. And that's just type 2 staff decision, black and white. And if you want to go above and beyond that, we've now created a Planning Commission parking adjustment program. And so it's not a variance where there's very specific parking metrics you're looking at. You're looking at how during a robust parking study over multiple days, how many peak parking spaces are open within 300 feet of your site, 600 feet of your site. So you just kind of do that analysis. Is this a safe location? So if you want to go above and beyond that, there's still an avenue, but it's a type 3 process through the Planning Commission. And we looked at...
This is in the proposal phase.
And this is for the proposal, yeah. We looked at potentially having a 35% reduction in the McLaughlin area, kind of along 7th Street and Center and High Street, and the Planning Commission did not vote to move forward with that at this time. So this is a map of the parking overlay district. It basically starts at the Blue Heron site to the south, takes kind of the traditional downtown, and then this is what kind of the north end mixed-use downtown. And let's see, this is Abernathy right here, and they wanted to bring it up to and include the Amtrak station. So this is the end of the Oregon Trail here, but they really felt it was important to have the Amtrak station as the northern terminus and have that is the area that they saw as the downtown parking overlay district. So how do we compare with other jurisdictions and how we look at parking? We looked at what Lake Oswego proposed to do, and it was a lot like what we're doing. It's currently tabled at the City Council right now for some political issues on their end, but it went through the Planning Commission, and they were looking at different ways of reducing the parking. It's a little apples and oranges. They kind of went out a different way, but on balance, it's about that same level, about a 50% reduction. And they also had a buffer area around their downtown, and that had a 25% reduction. But one thing I thought was interesting is they actually have a maximum area of parking space that you can use as parking. So that actually probably either pushes more reduction or pushes more vertical parking. I thought that was interesting.
Do we know what those political considerations are in Lake Oswego?
I think they're not moving, well, this is my actualization, but as far as I know, that happened in the last kind of administration, and so they've tabled a lot of issues from this last election in November. So I don't know the specific, but I know a fair amount of items that had gone through to the Planning Commission have now been tabled and waiting for further direction. I'm not the expert on that. So City of Portland, you've probably been hearing what's been going on with the new apartment buildings in City of Portland and some of the concern by community. And I actually live about 400 feet from one. So I'm well immersed in that conversation too. And just to give you some context, right now, if there's a new construction on a commercial street, Division, Fremont, Hawthorne, any of those east side, and also on the west side commercial streets, and you want to propose an apartment complex, you have no minimum parking requirements. So as of this last year. So for a long time, I think parking kind of was bleeding onto the street and it all kind of worked. And I think there were some neighborhoods that felt that they hit a critical mass and it just was too much. And so there was definitely some pushback from this latest infill. And so the City of Portland is looking at some caps. So fewer than 40 units wouldn't require off-street parking. And once you had over 40 units, you can have, one space for every 4 units, over 40 units. And then you can get some reductions for car sharing. And then you still don't have any parking requirement for mixed-use zones for commercial or office projects. So that stays the same. So that kind of tells you a little bit of, we're over here with our 50% reduction, and Portland's way over here.
We don't go to Portland.
No, but it's a different situation. They have, if you're on any of these commercial streets, you have a lot of potential on-street parking as you go into the neighborhood. And what the Portland community says, they do want active main streets. I think what the City of Portland community is, they're defining what their edge is, and some of them feel that they've hit that edge. And so, how do you work on that? But
therein lies the problem.
Right.
I mean, it's the big gorilla in the room, is that overflow into the neighborhoods.
Mm-hmm. Right. And so, for the City of Portland, if you told people, and that's where each community is going to find a little bit. If you said there shall be not one single person that overflows parks into the neighborhood, well, there's going to be no more development in Oregon City. I mean, I don't want to be dramatic, but it can't happen based on what we have. Very little to be able to grow. It's really what level of sharing existing on-street parking that we have as it abuts neighborhood and abuts other commercial, to get the vibrant downtown we want. And that is the rub. And I'm kind of going off on a further slide, so I actually like to revisit that when we do that. But we have to find our magic place, which says we want more development, and we are going to accept more congestion as we're finding our TSP, because congestion's happening. If we stop all development knowing that thinking congestion's going away, everything's just going to pass us by and congestion's still going to happen.
Right.
If we say no development because we don't want to share parking, development's going to pass us by, and we're still, that's the question is, if we say no to everything, we are still going to be impacted by growth and impacted by
good
transportation, and we will not get the vibrant community we want. So we have to find our path through that, and we need to find, there is going to be the Oregon City path, which is the balance.
Well,
and I don't have the answer right now, but is
part of that too is that Shoup is his name.
Shoup.
Shoup. Yeah. He mentions in one of his, what you handed out to us or sent to us, that the idea of developing multimodal, kind of in a sense forcing multimodal or incentivizing, isn't catching on as quick as they had hoped. So I think that's part of it too. That.
Am I the last? I must be the last page. Okay. I combined 2 PowerPoints with this, but let's see. The key takeaway I think that I'm trying to get at, oh, there we go, is to respond to Mr. Mahoney's comment about, Willamette Falls project and kind of my comment before about what we're learning about our existing intersections and the TSP failing regardless of what happens. I really worry that I want to make sure that we, as we move forward these next 10 years, capitalize on the people that are coming to the city and capitalize on some of the development, like the Willamette Falls Legacy Project, and try to build something better, So if we can, an example, if we have a Willamette Falls project that we know there's going to be some type of potential open space that we don't know who's going to own it yet or who's going to program it, we hope that there'll be a nice regional open space, and we know that there's going to be private investment. Well, how big of a parking garage are we going to help subsidize? Is it going to be on that site? How can we leverage that off to other development in downtown? How can these projects create a downtown where people have enough amenities that they will want to park and walk? And I think I was talking to Blaine a while back about people being reticent for driving down to Oregon City. And I think we are in this unique situation where we don't have enough daytime amenities. I think we're getting some good restaurants and nighttime amenities, but we don't have enough daytime amenities for the non-compelled visitors, I guess is the PC term of talking about people who are not going to the courthouse, the compelled and non-compelled. So how do we, if we know we can't build a parking garage right now because it doesn't make financial sense, if we know that congestion's happening and we're not necessarily going to fix every intersection between here and the 205 on-ramp, and we know we have all these compelled visitors, how do we capitalize to make it a more vibrant place so people will find a destination? And granted, I think the Willamette Falls Legacy Project is going to help because that will be a destination where you will park and you will be willing to walk up and down. I do know that if you go to a lot of the streets in East Portland, I have no problem parking and walking 4 blocks to where I need to go because it's interesting. I can park, I walk, I see what's going on in this shop, or this shop. I have no problem parking and walking because I have a perceived amount. I know, well, maybe I'll stop by this other place because there's enough amenities that it's considered a destination I can go to. Even if I really only need to go to one business, I'm fine parking and walking. And I think we're getting better in downtown, but we're just not there. And I think because of our topography and because of the courthouse, we're just in this unique situation. We're going to have to acknowledge who we are and just try to better and work on creating a place that people feel that they want to stay for an hour or two and maybe go to multiple things. And that's what the work that Main Street's doing, trying to bring more retail downtown. I mean, there's no one solution, but if you've seen, we are a sum of our parts, and we hopefully better. So if we get that critical mass, and we've kind of seen it with a lot of these projects in Main Street, where we've gotten a critical mass where people like being downtown, but we just don't have that critical mass of retail yet. And retail and housing is what the last piece of the puzzle we need. Mm-hmm. Until we get a more robust retail and more robust housing, we're still out of whack a little bit. But that's going to get us that vibrant downtown that we want.
So that is one thing that places like 23rd, they have lots of people in the neighborhoods around it. So
yeah. I mean, a lot of people from McLaughlin do take the elevator, but that's a piece of the puzzle. And I know the commission really wants to work on creating more housing downtown, and the students from PSU have been working with Lloyd, the 5 to 9 group. I don't know if you've seen some of their work, which I like their play of instead of 9 to 5, they're 5 to 9 because they were looking at housing downtown.
Didn't the commission recently adopt a policy that was started at the state level regarding taxes or tax benefits for mixed use?
Yeah, so there's a vertical housing tax credit, and I'm not the expert on that, but yet that's another thing we can do to help support housing downtown, and they're looking at that and getting involved in that state project. And Eric Underwood with our Economic Development Division is looking at that. And there's lots of good reasons for doing that. And one of them is we don't want to be the one city that isn't doing that. So we're looking at it. It does give some, I don't know the technicalities, but it is a tax credit, and so it's an incentive to provide a housing downtown. And that is one of the commission's goals, and we're looking at that. And it's having an end goal of what we want, and just knowing how each project comes in, how we can keep helping that. And I guess really the takeaway I have is we're going to have to be nimble with our parking standards, and we have to understand what's going to work for downtown, and just keep adjusting either the parking management or the parking standards to make it work. So we're not dictating the land use, but the development is helping to create the vibrant development we want. And, once again, if we come in a position like we see Portland, where they feel that in some areas they have gone too far, and of course that they're in a different scale. Their too far is different than our too far, but then we keep working. It's an actively managed. It's not one of those where we set the standards and then 20 years we come back and say, yeah, that worked great. And I think one of the last comments I wanted to give was when I spoke with Rick Williams a little bit about our proposal. He said, I've been working up and down the I-5 corridor in Oregon and Washington on these issues and communities. And for the most part, he said, I would recommend across the board, if you, at a minimum, every community should reduce their parking minimums by 50%. And I had another comment that said, if you have to create an elaborate parking variance program, you probably have too high parking standards. So it's also, if people start really applying for these parking variances or parking adjustments over a long period of time, we may need to revisit and say, looks like the development is and the community is looking for a smaller parking requirement. Now also, the more people are biking and taking transit to work downtown, which you are seeing with the creative class downtown at the Super Genius and the Funnel Box. Those are people who don't want to necessarily drive to work. We've got to give them, these businesses, an incentive to build down there if that's not what their employees necessarily want. So, it's trying to work on that as well.
We have a couple of employees that travel peddler bikes from Southeast Portland.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, wow, that's great. So,
But you got downtown where a lot of people have no mass transit do county business to get down there to the courthouse, from Sandy or SDK.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's it. We have to find our Oregon City solution. So we're not going to just have no minimum parking anywhere. But the other thing is we're making sure that maybe courthouse visitors and jurors, maybe they don't get to park the 2 blocks next to the courthouse, because once again, those are the high-valued retail spots. Maybe, and that's kind of the parking study is how do we work with the county to try to facilitate employees and jurors and kind of everyday compelled users to make sure that they are not kind of using those high valued spaces. And that's what this part, we've done a lot of trying to provide more and less expensive monthly parking in the north end. So you walk 3 blocks,
Simple shuttle system. It doesn't cost no arm.
Yeah. And I think that's, I don't want to speak for the county, but that's the long run. We're still negotiating with the county, but that's it. Parking management is a long-term solution, and the county is a major, and the courthouse is a major player.
Do we know how many employees are at the courthouse?
It's in the 2009 study, and I can get back to you. It's more than just the employees. It's also all the compelled visitors. So it's the attorneys, the people who are visiting that day, the jurors. So it's how do you address both the employees but also those compelled visitors each day, and how do you accommodate
buildings
them?
Downtown too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and how do you accommodate them?
Or is there a grant we could help the county get up there in red soils and cause another parking problem up there?
Yeah, and it's how to best utilize the on-street parking we have in a way that prioritizes our highest and best parking use. And our highest and best parking use in that core is for customers. So, ideally, Rick was also saying it should be up to the developer to figure out how his customers are getting there. I mean, how his employees are getting there. And it should be up to the city to figure out how the customers are getting there. Kind of that public versus private. And if the developers has found a way for his or her employees to park, it's not on the street, you know. And if they don't need as much, then they don't. We should be using the on-street parking for kind of that quick 1 hour, 2 hour, where we can get the most turnover all day long.
You know, you're fiddling with the American way of life, you know that. I mean, finding a parking place is Americana, you know, really.
Yeah, and we can do that. I'm just saying that if we keep our existing standards, we're not going to see much more development downtown.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a little polemic of me, but that's just one side of the extreme.
I can't think of any place that has the unique problems that Oregon City does. So with the river on one side and the bluff on the other, and you're just shrunk and you don't have anywhere to spread out. I can't think of any place.
Yeah, yeah. So we're going to come with. We have to
It has
always be
our problems.
creative
San
and
Francisco, you
always
ain't
come
gonna
up
go
with our parking management solutions.
Well, I predicted that, you know, the one Portland Journal, a business journal, said that we're the Pearl District in its infancy. You know, and I can see that the trend will continue. Retail will become more vibrant. Blue Heron, you know, it's just gonna. And so at some point, I can see that the courthouse, that's more of a functional public kind of a thing that may. But I like what you said about us finding our way, and we will find our way. And,
Yeah.
You know, we'll get through it, and I mean, it'll make sense. But you know, right now we're in that kind of awkward teenage.
But I think as long as you know that,
Mhm.
and you know that we'll just always keep reassessing, I think that's the key part. Is this, you know, downtown development doesn't happen by, you know, turning the screw and letting it, you know, letting the little toy go off. It's a lot of constant management, and you see that every day from the works of the Main Street Group and the works of parking management. It just is a constant vigilance.
It's a moving target.
Yeah,
Parking's a moving target.
Yeah.
I'm encouraged by your flexibility and also willingness to analyze what are the underlying subsidies, because there's lots of unintended consequences from the subsidies. And sometimes we get in a mental framework where these things are eligible for subsidies, but these aren't. And there's no particular reason other than past practice that something else shouldn't be subsidized. So maybe it's easier for the city to subsidize van that services county employees than build a permanent parking structure, you know.
Well,
I mean, if we're going to spend the money one way or another, which one actually works better?
And I forgot to say, that's Shroop's big thing, is money that is made from parking management should go back in to managing the parking.
Yes.
And so you need to monetize it, but then put that money back in. So, you know, where that's where you get the shuttle service and all that kind of, and the holding the hands of property owners and business owners on how can we help you get your employees not to park 2 feet from it? How do we, you know, it's how to take that money and then use it in the place that you're spending. Because people want to feel, businesses want to feel, I'm willing to be downtown. I know my customers have to park, but I'm in this completely rich environment with lots of amenities, and it's a value add, and I'm willing to be there. And we have to create that.
Is there a way to apply a systems development fee for off-street parking? In other words, you take the developer and say, okay, we're going to, for your employees, we're going to charge you X number of dollars. It goes back into the parking program for downtown.
There's lots of different, probably not systems development fees, but you could do, you know, a business improvement area, parking improvement. There's ways that, you know, but like Oswego had it where you could pay to not have your parking spaces and that money goes in. I mean, so once again, there's lots of creative ways, but the idea is you find a way to monetize it somehow and you put that money back into using it as management. And that's the big picture. But there's lots of ways and tools that may work. I mean, you know, I don't know if like this we could move forward, but that was a creative way of saying, if you don't want to build that parking, we're going to use it for parking management.
Well, I think you've done a heck of a job presenting this thing, and I followed you all the way up to wonky. I don't know what wonky means. Of course, I don't have an iPhone either.
I try to just put a little wonky in, but not
Okay,
get too
well-
wonky.
It's equivalent to cattywampus.
Gotcha.
bureaucratic,
Something
so-
ease, whatever one you want to put in front
That's
of
out in
it.
cyberspace someplace.
Yeah.
Okay, well,
Sorry.
thank you. Yeah,
Yeah.
Christina, any questions or other comments?
I just have one question. So, Bob and Betty, if you guys are have been searching through the Costco parking lot for a parking stall, and you both round the corner in opposite directions, and there's one parking stall there, who gets the right of way?
She gets it. Ladies first.
Ladies first. Okay.
Whoever
Talking
has
about
the biggest
Costco,
car.
John, when I was there the other morning before they opened, they have a van that brings their employees and drops them at
Oh.
the entrance, which I found very interesting.
Yeah.
A van that, would pick up,
Don't turn
who
it
knows
off.
where they
Turn it
park.
off. Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah. But thank you.
I must be the only one who lives in Marion County, but when I get called for jury duty, they actually advise us not to drive, and they give you bus passes
Yeah.
to take the chariot or whatever it is,
They
which
do
doesn't
that
go to
here.
my house anyway.
They do that here.
Well,
Parking
Portland
they-
does
they
that
do?
too. They give you,
Yeah, oh,
Clackamas County doesn't?
Yeah, they give a parking,
Multnomah County.
They give what?
No,
What
a
is-
bus. They give
bus
you
pass.
a bus pass.
and they say you can park in that lot down on 13th, but
I didn't get a bus pass when I got.
you didn't ask for it.
Probably
Oh,
two
you have to
years
ask
You gotta ask for it. But you gotta get there first, to ask for it.
Well, and that's it. Clackamas County is a rural county. I mean, a lot of it. So that is, it's trying to. We are the county seat of a large area is rural, and that's the intersection. Then we're in this constrained downtown. So that's using the unique Oregon City approach, because we can't get out of that situation because we have people that can't take the bus from Estacada here. They either take too long or they don't have access. All right.
Thank you very much.
Thank
You
you
did a
very
great
much.
job. Appreciate it,
Oh,
Christina.
actually, real briefly, I'm sorry. So knowing that you are not going to be meeting July and August, I just want to give you a quick update on the Willamette Falls Legacy Project. We're trying to meet with all the cities advisory groups, so we'll probably catch up with you in September. But within 3 weeks, we'll be having a website launched. We will be having community conversations all summer long with organizations both in Oregon City and region-wide about the Willamette Falls Legacy Project. And we will be having our first community interactive event at the First City Festival downtown on Main Street on July 27th. And potentially also our second community interactive event will be the Willamette Falls Festival on October 5th and 6th, if I can remember the dates. With the goal, we'll give you a few more dates, with the goal of coming in front of the Planning Commission next spring, specifically April 24th, 2014, for the first hearing of the vision and the master plan rezone for the site. And I'm happy once you reconvene in September to walk you through the project, but I just wanted to give you a heads up that you'll be seeing lots of information coming soon, and I really encourage you over this summer. The website will have lots of information. We're going to do some opt-in surveys through Metro, if you've been involved in their opt-in program. If not, recommend sign up. It's they can get over 18,000 people region-wide, and if you haven't signed up, you can sign up for this, some of these upcoming surveys. The website will have it. We'll have lots of information. We'll have lots of community interactive events, and we'll probably be at some some concerts in the park, and Saturday and Wednesday and Saturday farmers markets as well.
Have you guys registered a URL for the Red
Yes,
Bus
but I don't want to say it out loud.
Okay.
Yes, probably we're about 3 weeks away from that going live.
And if you don't already have this, could you make sure that all of us are on your e-blast list?
Yes, we will have all, and then we will actually be visiting you personally in September. It sounds like when
Okay.
you're back online after the summer.
Okay. Perfect.
Yeah,
Thank you.
great.
Okay, so now we're going to move to item 6C, and that is the McLaughlin Boulevard Enhancements Phase 2. And Paul Egger was going to share information on his concerns for the volume over capacity, and so we're going to discuss that. Evidently, did Paul talk to anybody?
No, he didn't, and I wasn't really sure what to do with this item other than it had the CIC. Paul Edgar's on the CIC committee, as is Bob LaSalle, and he came to that meeting with the desire to talk about it at the CIC, and I think after some discussion, maybe before the meeting, they recommended to Paul, and he agreed that it should be brought before the TAC, and so we included it on the agenda. I didn't again get Kathy this analysis, which we've since passed on to you in hard copy, so it's not in your agenda package. I've spent a lot of time on this topic, talking through it with you and with the Project Advisory Committee and with the CIC and with Paul, with the Urban Renewal Commission, and I'm just not really sure where to go with this other than it keeps coming up, and the item that keeps coming up, for those of you that aren't aware, is that right now the McLaughlin Boulevard project is a grant-funded project through Metro, and we've been moving down the design path of that project for several months, and we're beyond the 60% design phase, albeit Paul raised this when we were at about the 50% design phase, where that project includes it's a full boulevard project, but it really doesn't, the funding wasn't allocated for additional lanes. And one of the things that Paul would like to see done is there's a pinch point between Dunes Drive and the Clackamas River Bridge, which is essentially the project limits, where he'd like to see at the intersection there's actually 3 through lanes, but the outside, or the right-hand through lane is fairly short, and there's a pinch point there at McDonald's where there's also a ODOT notification sign, and just the curbs and sidewalks are narrow right there, and Paul would like to see that roadway widened, and we realize that the cost to do that, based on the amount of additional travel lane that might really provide, is cost prohibitive. And so that's kind of been his big press, was to try to see if we could get additional funding to add some additional through lanes, so that when the problem with the Dunes Drive McLaughlin Boulevard project is really traffic backing up from the I-205 99E interchange, and when that happens during the peak hour, that traffic backs into Dunes Drive and even further back towards Clackamas River Bridge. And at those times, it doesn't happen regularly. I've been there at plenty of times during peak hour, and doesn't seem to be a problem. But there are times, special events, I'm sure, maybe when the bridge was closed, when the Highway 43 bridge was closed, when there may have been a fair amount of backup. So, once those cars back up beyond this outside travel lane and that pinch point, then there's no way for vehicles that might want to use that third lane to be able to get through. So I understand Paul's point with regard to the idea that more lanes move more traffic. Nobody's going to dispute that. But this project is just not going to build it for us. We've got the city's committed to building the project. The region's committed to funding that project, and adding additional travel lanes at this time isn't in the cards. And so I don't know what else we can say at this group, but we put it on the agenda for you, and if you want to take it any further or want further discussion, I'll try to do my best to answer that.
Right now, people are using the bike lane for a driving lane right there, because that's a wide lane right there. They pull in there, but there's only 4 lanes across that bridge, one way in both directions. So,
right,
patience.
Yeah,
There used to be an off ramp up there just off that bridge that went down to Main Street Loop.
I heard that. Yeah, I heard.
And that was great, because you sit right down and.
Was that before or after McDonald's went in? I mean, was that there when
when the state redone that overpass that got under, goes over Main Street there, and then they took it out. Said they had to take it out, but it came right down there. It was only a single lane, but it was great to come down there, stop, make the left, and go around. But then now you have to go all the way down the dunes, come around. The other was just a quick way off.
I guess the other component to that is there's this feeling like pressing this issue and scrutinizing it and comparing. The Cove is also moving forward, so there's some development opportunity at the Cove it comes and goes depending on where the city's at with regard to urban renewal funding, and I think there's some concern that this issue is being raised to slow that development down or prevent that development from happening.
Well, this is pretty much under the jurisdiction of ODOT, isn't it, John? This whole project? That's what I gather.
ODOT owns 99E.
Yeah.
So
and they're responsible for the administration of the grant money, right?
Metro is actually responsible
Metro?
for administration of grant money.
Okay.
But it's interesting. ODOT has been supportive of the project throughout, and depending on who, if you ask the traffic engineer from ODOT, would you like more lanes? His response is going to be sure. But if you talk to the grant administrators and those that know the regional problems with traffic, especially at that hotspot, they look at that with a little more critical eye and say, well, that more lanes might be nice to have, but it's just not in the cards for this particular project, and may not be warranted with full build-out capacity through the next 20 years. And this report shows that there's going to be more congestion on 99E over the next 20 years. The intersection gets very close to failure even at the new V over C standard. What does that mean exactly? It's kind of back to the same old problem. We just can't build our way out of it. And so there's, but in the next 20 years, is there going to be innovation in how we travel? My guess is if we're having to sit in intersections for 2 or 3 cycles, we're going to start finding better ways, different ways of commuting.
Is there a way they can time the lights so a bigger group of people can get through it? Like I say, one cycle between the 3 lights, all left turns. And
they can't fix this problem with signal timing. The problem is really at the interchange. So, and because of the design of that interchange with the cloverleaf on and off ramps, there's not a lot of capacity there for additional lanes without doing something on 205, and it's just a very expensive project. And ODOT has pretty much told us they can't afford to build their way out of it, even with federal funding. And there's more needed improvements in other parts of the region, and we're unlikely to see. In fact, they didn't want us to add they're always excited about us adding fees to help fund transportation improvements, but they didn't want us to list in our transportation system plan projects that we couldn't afford to do, that they weren't intending to fund, even if it was just to help drive an SDC that would help fund a match, a 20% match or a 10% match. They said, no, that's just not the right way to do that. What we'd like you to do is look at the corridor and do what we call alternate mobility standards, whereby we would look at the corridor and figure out what's a reasonable amount of time to get through the corridor, as opposed to what our current measure is a reasonable amount of time to get through a particular intersection. That's some planning and transportation analysis hocus pocus that I'm not quite sure how it's going to play out, but that's kind of what our charge is. Once we get the transportation system plan adopted, is to spend some time and energy on alternate mobility standards.
Well, and that's and I read through the transportation system plan, and it recognizes that there are 3 large interchanges where there are issues with congestion, but they have, for all the reasons you've mentioned, they've exempted those from meeting the standard requirements. And in fact, they say that the 1 rating system, the level of service, the LOS, that's actually used in the regional, whereas on these types of intersections or interchanges, that they do what you said earlier about the V over C, and according to that, using that metric, the intersections actually fall within the requirements. So it's
Yeah, it's really just a different standard. So the level of service is what traditionally has been used, and as the state sees growth and continue to outgrow the ability to pay for these projects, the volume over capacity standard is a standard that they're looking at. It's a 2-hour period instead of a 1-hour period, so that they look at the peak 2 hours instead of the peak hour. When I look at it, I say this is a standard that allows for more congestion. That's really what it's coming down to. And so until kind of we as a community find other ways, other modes, and even Clackamas County is going to have to come up with different modes or buy into those same modes that you might see in being so successful in Multnomah County. Getting on your bikes, walking to work. And it's a little tough for Oregon City because we're on the fringe of the metro area. It's not like we're in the heart of that where we've got all these support networks of roadways and pathways. We're kind of this one little line that kind of heads south, right? And we don't have as many alternatives or alternative routes. We don't have the bus transportation that other communities have. We don't have the bike facilities. We've got topography, another challenge for Oregon City for bicycles. But
I think another aspect of this too, and you mentioned it earlier, and that's the Cove development. As much as I've been able to read on that, going back to your comment that this really is an issue with ODOT and the developer, and my understanding from what I've read, that ODOT put a condition on their approval, and the Cove developer met that. It was a dollar amount for traffic mitigation, other things, and the Cove developer met that condition, and ODOT gave its approval on the project. So I don't know what to do with that, if it's been approved and it falls within the V over C metrics, with the development. I just, I don't know where to go with it.
Well, my opinion is, or my understanding was that this McLaughlin Phase 2 was for pedestrian and bicycle and beautification issues. There was never any intent to add additional travel lanes, but their main issue was, would this project cause any adverse effects on traffic, which it doesn't. And so I think the project is following the original guidelines and purposes, and I'd just like to see this issue of the additional lane put to rest and proceed with this project.
Yeah.
We are proceeding. I just know that it comes up and.
Yeah.
Well, I don't think Paul's concern really is one that should affect the progress of the project. I mean, my understanding is like Bob said, that the objective initially was to introduce a gateway to Oregon City with improvements of an architectural and nature primarily, and so I think it ought to. I support proceeding. I'm sure not going to suggest that we hold it up for Paul's comments. In all due respect.
Okay, any other comments, John? Nope. Eddie? Okay. All right, let's move forward then. And item 6D, interruption of Washington Street bike lane, 12th Street.
So we have, the next three items are informational. So if you recall, just for expedience of our meeting, we were going to provide the information, and if you wanted to talk about them, we can. We're willing to do that, but other than that, we're not necessarily providing. So that, yeah, 6D, E, and F are all informational.
I've heard good input, good feedback on the crossing at 7th and John Adams. So,
It's not in yet, but
no.
as soon as we finish up, we're just getting ready to start our big summer push with slurry seal starting pretty soon. So my streets division is really booked up in terms of work orders. So we'll clear up some space in the back end of July and hopefully get it in by then.
I said we weren't going to. One piece of information about 7th and John Adams that we talked about the other day. There's the art piece that's right at the corner there. I don't know that it would be good for the art piece or the street sign to leave that art piece there. It stands tall enough that our plan is to move it to another location that was planned for some kind of art in the future at the corner here is 7th and Center. So it'll be essentially 2 blocks. It'll be moved 2 blocks down 7th Street.
That art piece fits right in there with Wonky for me.
I don't know though. There have been a few times where I'm distracted, busy, going down the street, and all of a sudden I think there's someone crossing, and it makes a good crossing guard. It's made me jump a few times. So
Put a flag in its hand. And
that's right.
We want to share that information with the McLaughlin neighborhood and just, but we do kind of think that leaving it there is going to be more problematic than, and would detract from that pretty interesting piece of art.
Yeah, to say the least.
Do you want to talk about Abernathy Road and Redland?
You guys had requested that we speak to the county in regards to Abernathy Road and Redland. We met with one of their traffic engineers out there last week and requested for them to take a look at it and see what we can do in terms of realigning the signal heads. And the request's been put into their streets division, and they should be moving on a response to us hopefully by the end of next month. In addition to this, the key turns in there, the arrows indicating which of the turn lanes you're coming into, the legends, all need to be basically restriped. So we're going to be coming through there at the latter part of the summer and restriping those just within our own in-house forces. So that should help address some of the concerns you guys have brought up.
Thank you.
Okay.
I was afraid you were going to say they turned you down flat. I was going to tell you they must be cross-eyed.
My response to you was they will get a response to us in the next 30 days, so we will see. So, but Christian Snuffin, their traffic engineer, seemed to he thought it was warranted, so he forwarded it on to the operations division.
All right. Thank you. Item 6H, bylaws. They've been are going to be sent to the commission tomorrow night, right? And for approval.
Yeah, Kathy put the resolution and the bylaw changes together, and they're on the agenda, and they're on the consent agenda. So I don't even expect much discussion about it.
Unless they pull it from the consent agenda to talk about.
Right.
But yeah, other than that, it goes forward.
So, I know the mayor makes appointments to that, so and he's not had problems with that kind of language in the past. So, but if you know people that you're thinking of that fit in that category that you think would be good on our committee, let us know.
Yep. All right, construction projects.
So again, that's an information item, but I did want to talk about, a couple things. I guess, we've been using some of the guys on Matt's crew to kind of help manage some of our street projects, and that may make sense to you because they're in the street division, street supervisor, street crew leader, but they're really stepped up with more project management skills than what you'd typically see from those staff. So it's helped because the engineering group, especially through this transition, we've got some staff shortages right now because of leave needs, And so they've really done, I think, a really good job of Pearl Street is one example of that. That little project had a few legs to it, even though it's a small little project. It had some complexities to it. And now the paving project and Claremont, those are projects that we're trying to get things done. The Slurry Seal project, they're relying a lot on Kathy to help make sure they don't make any mistakes with regard to how we, issue contracts and how we follow through with those. So that's been pretty nice. I know Kathy's put a lot of effort into these mailers and just getting the information out to the neighborhoods. So that's one piece. What I really wanted to talk about was Claremont. Claremont Way from Malala Avenue, and there's an insert on the last page of our packet.
There's 3 larger ones. If you guys want
Yeah,
to
they are
share.
fairly small. In fact, I can't read them. But the contractor gets much larger copies, so he'll know what to do with those. But essentially, we had planned to pave all of Claremont from Malala to Myers Road. But in Claremont, there's also a water line, and it needs to be replaced. So we combined a portion of that project from Berta to we looked initially at from Berta to Myers Road to replace the water line as well. We just couldn't afford to do both the water line work and the street work. We want to get the water line replaced before we do the street work. We've also got some other utility work in there that we're taking on. But really the main cost concerns were not enough funding to do all the water lines. So we're replacing the water line now from Berta to the park, essentially. I can't remember the side street there, but it's near the park. And we're going to pave all of that section. We're also going to pave from Berta out to Malala. So the piece that won't get replaced with water or with pavement will be from really the park out to Myers Road.
It's not very long.
It actually is pretty long when you think about the quantities and the width of that roadway. But so those pieces aren't going to be finished, or that piece isn't going to be finished. But what I really wanted to talk about was this idea of eliminating some on-street parking and replacing it with dedicated bike lanes. So on Claremont right now, the way it's signed, if you're driving down Claremont from Malala towards Myers Road, on your right-hand side, it's posted as no parking between the hours of 6 a.m. and 8 p.m. You're not allowed to park there. On the other side, it's not posted for no parking. You're allowed to park there. The way it's striped, during those hours that parking is allowed on your right-hand side, people use it very limited. I suspect they use it on the weekends more when there's when they're having somebody over, those kind of things. That's when it's used more. But this section of Claremont is listed in our transportation system plan as needing bike lanes. So we've made a change to the contract. Actually, we did it in an addendum. So we got bids on this piece of work to change that striping so that there'll be if you're driving from Malala to Myers Road, the lane configuration will be such that you'll have a curb, a 5-foot bike lane, an 11-foot lane, another 11-foot lane, another 5-foot bike lane, and a parking strip. So there'll only be parking on your left-hand side or on the south. Claremont's kind of at a weird angle, so it's more your southeast side of Claremont will have on-street parking, but the other side will not. So we think that's the right thing to do. We recognize that there's probably going to be some community frustration with some of that, but to making some of these decisions to get people onto other modes of travel is going to be at times have a little pain associated with it. But we think it's the right thing to do, and we think that's the direction we got through the transportation system plan. Yeah. So just wanted to let you know about that. And
have you communicated that to the neighborhood yet?
We have not, but we're going to. In the form of this is what we're going to do, as opposed to You know, and sometimes that's the hard part.
Right.
You know, making the community feel like they're part of the decision was something we felt we got out of the transportation system plan. Taking these projects and putting the debate into them again may be something that we have to do, but, you know, this is the first one, so we're going to...
Yeah.
John, is there some way that in notifying people that you can refer to the transportation system plan as having been adopted? Or
as soon as we get it adopted.
yeah, as soon as you get it adopted, but suggesting to them that this is city policy.
Yeah.
You know, it's already been discussed by the community and city policy. And when do you see the construction? Which is going to come first, the adoption of the plan or the construction schedule?
We're going to, on this section at Claremont, we're actually tomorrow awarding the contract to a contractor that's going to do the work. He's going to start with the water line work. We haven't seen his schedule yet, but we need to get the notice out.
Yeah.
Yeah, we do. So we'll give them the notice. We'll reference the yet to be adopted TSP, but we expect that TSP to be adopted in July. So it'll be, the TSP will be adopted before the striping will happen.
And the bike lanes will go all the way out to Malala.
Well, they'll go all the way out to Malala, where they won't go. There'll be a transition, a safe transition that's going to need to occur where our paving limits stop on Claremont. So I guess that's the other point, is where near the park we're going to transition, and I guess I can't. We don't have provisions yet for how we're going to proceed with that next piece of Claremont.
The other thing I'd really like to see, and I don't know how we'd ever do it, you know, and I think it's in the TSP, but that Myers Road is we actually bike ride quite a bit, and some of those neighborhoods aren't connected. If you know, so it'd be nice to get bike lanes that go. There are portions of Myers Road that aren't don't have bike lanes, and so.
Yeah.
You know, my strategy is get out in the middle of the lane, so you know it becomes so obvious. If you try and hug real tight to the white line, then you risk your tire going off into the. And then you fall in front. You know, so just get completely out in the middle of it and make them wait. But you know, it's not a big portion, but it does. It's a concern. So eventually, it'd be nice to get that main artery or.
We don't have plans to put a bike lane down the middle of the street like City of Portland's talking about Foster Road.
Really?
Down the middle. I call that a suicide lane for bicycles. But they were talking about putting it down the middle, make it wide.
John, I have a question on Claremont Avenue. On the north side, there will be no parking. What around the park with all the activities that go on in that park?
Well, they'd be required to park either on the other side of the street.
Or within the neighborhood?
Now, again, under this project, we're likely to keep it as is in front of the park.
Okay.
But yeah, the long-term plan for that would be to stay consistent with this new section and have no parking on the park side.
Okay.
So they'd have to park on the other side of the street or park in the parking lot.
Okay.
Typically, we don't see parking. I mean, there's not much for ball fields there. There's one ball field, and it's one of those parks that doesn't generate a lot of traffic. But there is some, you know, there's a volleyball thing there, and a picnic area. I imagine there's times when people park there. So, although it's posted no parking during that time.
Yes. Okay.
Okay. Moving on to future agenda, and we do have some items that we had mentioned earlier that we'll tag on here, but future agenda item 10th and Main Street, pedestrian crossings. And so, what's the issue there, John, just in brief?
Yeah, did that come through? I'm trying to remember where that concern came about, but there's some concern that we got in the form of an email about 10th and Main. There's stop bars shown there, but there's that's a concrete raised intersection. So we've heard from a couple of citizens that I can't remember. I don't remember how this came about, but anyway, they've made some complaints and suggestions that we should stripe that like we do any other crosswalk. So stripe the concrete, scored concrete with our white crosswalks. And so we're kind of looking into that a little bit. We'll present it to you at the September meeting, I guess.
All right. And then, John, you wanted to talk about June 23rd, the triathlon.
So, yeah, this is just one of those events that is going to impact Oregon City somewhat. It's on a Sunday morning. It's basically the start is at the Cove. They're going to swim through the Cove downstream to the boat ramp in Clackamas Park. Out of there, they'll hop on their bicycles and they'll bicycle down Main Street Extension to 15th, out to Washington, and take Washington all the way out to Clackamas River Drive to Carver, and then turn around and come back, and then back to the park where they'll leave their bikes and start their run, and they'll run down Main Street Extension all the way down Main Street to 7th. They're going to run through the tunnel, up the stairs, down Singer Hill, and back onto Main Street and back to the park, and that's their race course. And there's going to be a fair amount of traffic impact just because they're crossing lots of intersections, so they've got a fair amount of effort moving forward with keeping things safe. You'll still be able to drive down Main Street. The runners are going to occupy the parking strip, so as opposed to the travel way, but there you may be delayed. So Patty, you want to know
Okay.
where you're going to be delayed. That's
I'll be
the
at
place.
Shasta, okay?
John,
Shasta?
Yeah, I'll be at Lee Shasta.
John, what about the traffic on Clackamas River Drive and the bicycles going down that way? Is that going to be closed off, or they're just going to negotiate that?
Yeah, they're just going to negotiate it. I think they're going to have bicycle event signage along Clackamas River Drive. The county's permitting that piece of the. So the minute they leave the city limits, the county's issuing their own permit. But yeah, I think no closures there. It's just bikes are going to have to obey the rules of the road, and so are the vehicles.
on there.
Yeah.
And then they're going to have some kind of traffic control. I haven't seen what that looks like, but at the Carver Bridge, they're going to have some traffic control to get them turned around and headed back.
John, I notice you keep referring to they.
The county.
Yeah, no, the participants in this, the Ironmen. I take it you're not involved in this personally. You're not going to be carrying your bikes or swimming. Oh, I
Thanks
just
for
wanna-
thinking that I might
I wanna
be
get that
qualified
in-
for that, though.
In the
but I-
minutes, I want to get that.
Blaine is
clarified.
going to do that.
That's right. Yeah.
Martin's the triathlete here. I'm definitely
Before I
not.
blew my knee out. So, I'm about 3 years separated from doing any more races.
How long a course is that, John? You know?
There's two distances. There's a sprint course, which is an 800-meter swim followed by a 8-mile bike ride followed by a 3-mile run. And then there's that's the latter part of the race. The first part is what's referred to as the Olympic distance, which is 1,600-meter swim, a 16-mile bike ride, and a 10K run. Yeah.
It's the one that
I made the announcement at our Park Place general meeting about this event and brought up some discussion, and I had to immediately dispel the rumors that I had entered.
Well, we've had an opportunity to meet with Patrick Bolin, who's
Yeah.
and he's top notch, and
He's a good go-getter, and
He really
lives
is.
in Oregon City. He's kind of an interesting guy, but yeah, he's really brought a lot to the table. He's these events, people just lots of times come, not him necessarily, but we've had a lot of suggestions of fun runs and things like that. They don't really kind of identify with all the concerns that might come up for the traffic on those kind of events. But Patrick has gone through a learning curve with us, but he's been right on, met his commitments, been available whenever we needed him, so good guy. And that event, I think he told me today that there was a little over 250.
258. Originally
That's
he planned
crazy.
to cap at 250. He's
Yeah.
broken that, and he's actually considering up to taking 300.
This
So
is
and for a
this is-
first-time event, this
first-
is
that's great.
very, very
Yeah.
promising.
Yeah.
What I really appreciate about Patrick's leadership is he's, in designing this, he's been very pro Oregon City, pro local businesses, and trying to design this in a way that optimizes our exposure. And I think we have something very unique from what I've heard from triathletes that have stopped in at the store, that the fact that you can swim in an open body of water as opposed to a public swimming pool doing laps is pretty exciting. And then the grand staircase is just, that's very unique. And
That
so
really
it's,
is.
it adds a
Good.
lot of flair.
That's good.
That'd be quite a swim down through that
But,
street there.
Yeah.
Okay. I just wanted to mention a couple of things. The antique fair, the chamber decided this year that they've done a lot of analysis and discussion, and they're moving the antique fair this year from downtown. I think it's been many years in the downtown Main Street where they've closed down Main Street, and they're going to move that to the Interpretive Center this year. And so one of the benefits is that you don't have to close streets down, and the vendors are able to come the day before and set up, as opposed to coming at 2 a.m. To start getting things ready. So, logistically there are some advantages, but anytime you change, there are some downtown business owners that are, it will have a financial impact on them. So I guess we'll just have to see what happens. This could be a grand slam for the chamber, and of course it's their event, and primarily we want this to be a great fundraiser for the chamber. But so there's some discussion about alternative events down in the downtown area. So anyway, no street closures this year.
Yeah, I was excited to read that because some energy goes into that.
Go ahead.
I've got one comment. John, you might know that I'm a member of the Planning Commission. And, it's always been traditional that the Planning Commission leads the charge for growth and development in the community because of their review process and what have you, and state law and the things that they're required to do by law. But the more I experience sitting on this committee here, I begin to realize that the backbone of growth and development is the transportation system in any community. Mm-hmm. And I think the unsung heroes pretty much are the public works people that keep everything flowing in the right direction.
Yeah.
Water and whatever else you want to mention. So I think that I think that you're doing a heck of a job. I really appreciate this, and I hope that the City Commission understands and appreciates this committee here and our public works people in keeping our transportation system, up and running. I really do, because there's nothing we can't do as long as we work together. Planning Commission, transportation, any other department, and it all boils down to communication, and understanding each other's desire to get the job done. So I just, I know we're not going to meet until September. So I just wanted to pass that on to you in the meantime.
Well, thank you.
And Marie, I got a pothole in front of my house.
I was wondering where it was
This
going.
You're such a great guy,
it's
John,
not-
by the way.
It's not a pothole, it's a speed bump.
Oh,
Well, I have
Traffic control device.
Is you going to be any more work done on that 7th and Taylor in that intersection there? There is a pothole there which has got a shut-off valve, and it's very dangerous on a motorcycle at night. You come around that corner and all of a sudden, there it is.
Jonathan Taylor. Huh. Okay.
It's
I'll
about
take a look at it tomorrow.
4.5 inches deep or so.
Wow.
It's a little one, but
Right.
they didn't cover, and it looked like they should seal that. The paving there looks terrible. You guys tore it up. Somebody, contractor tore it up about 4 weeks ago.
Yeah, that's been our problem contractor, and the intent was for them to go back in and fix some bad asphalt, and I'm not sure if they've sealed that or not, but
No, it's bad there. There's gravel and stuff around there from it's breaking up, and that chuck hole, or They didn't pave over the manhole needs to be raised, or the shut-off valve.
Okay, we'll look at that. But,
Scares you on a bike.
Bob, I appreciate that. It's fun working with this group in particular, really is. So I appreciate that. And we'll keep doing what we can do.
Keep doing what you're doing.
Yep.
Thank goodness the measure passed.
Yeah.
Water rates, yeah.
Yeah.
That was a good success.
Are they gonna put water lines all on Malala Avenue up there in the new construction? Or I noticed they did
Certainly, thank you.
a half a block today.
I drive Claremont. Oh,
In front of
You got
the rental place, Pioneer Rental.
That's storm line.
Oh, is that storm sewer?
Yeah, it's
When I also
a,
have a little neighborhood.
that's
All right.
about one of the few lines
We're
that are
adjourned.
replaced.
There you go.
Hellendale.
Okay, let's see, how do I get out of this? Am I on?